What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're going to be covering the second part of the fighting game camera tutorial today. So, for the camera in the first episode, what we allowed it to do was if we took the position of the players, if they got too close, almost kissing, then the camera would zoom in. If we got too far away, it would zoom out. It will actually pan to your height, like if people were jumping, it will zoom up and down for them, or pan the camera up and down for them. And if they were to move all the way to the right or all the way to the left, the camera will also pan that direction. So the cube in the background is for reference, since we don't have walking animations or anything like that in. You can see the cube is actually stationary. Right now we're moving right now we're moving left. Okay, so that's what happened in the first episode. That's where we got to. If you want to watch that episode, or if you just need a refresher on it, then I will link it in the iCard in the top right corner of the screen right now. And that will help you get caught up to where we are. In this episode, we're going to put camera edges or stage boundaries, or whatever it is you want to call them, where the characters can only go so far until they reach essentially an invisible wall. Like I'm up against it now. And I'm up against it now. We're also going to make it so the characters can only go so far away from each other. As you can see, I'm holding right for both characters right now. We're moving. So what's actually happening is they're getting stuck when they get too far away from each other from moving in that direction, because we don't want the characters to be able to either A, go off screen, or B, zoom the camera out too much if you allow the field of view to change that drastically. So we're going to make it so the characters have to be basically within the bounds of the camera, but then they also have to be within the bounds of the stage. That'll be part 2 of the camera series, the mini-series we're doing of the overall fighting game tutorial series. We will do more work with the camera in the future, just mainly little things. There will probably be some few big changes, but not a big deal for now, honestly. This should be a sufficient fighting game camera for pretty much everything you'll need to do for quite a bit. So, anyway, after that long drawn-out opening, let's get into exactly how we're doing this. And I will make the camera edges a bit visible, which they actually disappeared on me. I don't know why I just had this window open, but okay. You do you, Unreal. There it is. So let me make this visible for you guys so you can see what's actually happening. So I actually have these large invisible walls. Make sure they're big enough so that no one can jump over them or anything. But essentially, it's literally just a big square. It's a static mesh. It's a cube. And if the players touch up against it, they can't move past it. So you can see they block it on both sides. And these represent the stage boundaries. However, you can see I'm not up against the stage boundary for this left character right here. But I can't move to the left anymore. And that's because the characters are too far apart, so the camera is getting too far away. And since we want to kind of eliminate that and make it so they have to be fighting on even ground, or have to move over to one another first, then that's why. So you can actually see if we come over probably about here. Yeah, neither of these characters are up against the boundaries, but they can't move their perspective directions, I should say. So the character on the left cannot move left anymore, and the character on the right cannot move right anymore. So hopefully that clears that up. Now, how we're going to actually be doing that today is probably easier than you'd think, actually. We don't need to kind of move those walls in any sort of way. I've seen a lot of people try and move the walls and make blockers that are kind of dynamic. You could do this. Actually, I've seen games do it, and it works. But I think it's a little bit more complicated than is actually necessary. So, if we go into the code. So if you're new to this series, you may want to catch up. We are 20 episodes in now. So I'll link the first episode right here in an iCard in the top right for you. If you're not interested in that, just interested in the camera, don't worry. I'm going to try and ignore everything else we've done, so that you can just focus on the camera and put this into your game without needing to know anything else about the fighting game. So the only thing we really need to do this time is have a max distance apart. If you go to your header file of your default character, just add a max distance apart variable. We can end up finding out an appropriate max distance based on the field of view of the camera and how far away it is from the characters. However, I just eyeballed it. That'll be fine for now. I mean, it's fine in general. However, if you do have different stages where the cameras are farther or closer to the characters, or it's at an angle for any sort of reason, or you have breakable walls and it has to move, you know, all these different things, they could end up changing this. So keep in mind, I just eyeballed it for now. We can change it later if we want more specific functionality, but essentially just make a float. I did make it blueprint read write. However, I don't think it's necessary. I should actually change this from health. I just copied the one above it. So I'll make this camera. There we go. So that's actually all I'm adding to the header class. I'm just adding one variable, max distance apart. Okay, now if we go into the CPP file, basically, if you go down to the constructor, here's where we're going to set our value. So this is where we set all of our other values. This is basically when the object is constructed or first being made and compiled and all that junk. Not compiled, I should say, like first being spawned even would be a better word. But the max distance apart I set to be 800. So this distance is going to be whatever on your stage. Like for me, it's Y, even though we're on the main menu. Here, I'll show you. Might as well. This might be easier. So you can see that in my stage itself, Y is the axis we care about. We don't care about Z or X in terms of distance and things like that. So what I need to do is essentially set a distance, a value, like I put 800, that is far enough away that I don't think the characters should get any farther away from each other, but they should be able to be this far apart and still be okay, right? Because you don't want to make it too small. I could make it 200 and then they would only be able to go like this far away from each other. Well, maybe I don't want to be fighting in this close quarters combat, okay? So maybe I want to make it 800, maybe depending on your game it's 1200, whatever. You can play around with this value. Just make it something along these lines. I'll show you exactly why I picked 800 when we get into the blueprint where I set up the camera. But for now, just make it some value you can test with whatever you want. Okay, so all we're going to do, I promise, it's simpler than you'd probably expect. All we're going to do is go down to your move right function, which if you're using the template, the third-person template, or the side scroller template of Unreal, then you will have this regardless if you've been following the tutorial or not. I went down to the bottom, where usually you would do add movement input with this line right here. So I did not add this. This is how your character moves left and right. We're going to add some distance to kind of restrict when they can move certain directions. We want to be careful with this because if you get yourself in a state where you could meet these conditions, where you might not intend to meet them, they could lock your character out of moving again for the rest of the level. So it is kind of dangerous, but it's not bad. We can be careful and go about this pretty smartly, intelligently, and be all right. So what you're going to want to do is we're going to make a new variable called current distance apart. It's the absolute value, ABS, that's what this is. It's not your automatic braking system. It's absolute value. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab our other player's getActorLocation.y, so basically their Y location, and subtract our location.y, our Y location. So get the absolute value of these two locations. That's the distance. That's essentially all that is. You're getting the distance from one player to the other, from the enemy to us. Okay? And if you don't have this other player variable, it's literally a reference, it's a pointer to the other player. There you go. Okay. Now, what this is, again, it's our distance apart. It's our distance from one character to the other. So all we need to do is check if this is greater than or equal to our max distance apart. If we're already reaching our farthest distance. If we are, we don't want them to be able to walk any farther in that direction. Pretty simple, right? So here's how you can do a check for this, because it does depend on the side you're on. So if we do current distance apart plus value. Now value is a parameter of this function that is passed in. This is your axis value. So this value determines what direction you're going to be going. For example, if you're holding left on your keyboard, and left makes the character move left, the value will be -1. If you're holding right, the value will be +1. Same with a gamepad, whatever. If you're pushing left on the joystick, it'll be -1. So essentially what this is doing, it's taking the distance that we just set, So we know that it's either greater than max distance apart or exactly equal to it. And we're going to add the value. If this is less than the current distance apart and we are not flipped, then we'll be good to move that direction. So what this part's doing, so say your max distance is 800 like we are. Say we're at 800. If this was a positive 1, we're trying to move right and we're at the farthest point that we can be, then this value is going to be greater than the current distance apart. The current distance is going to be 801, which is greater than our current distance, but we don't want to be able to get farther away from our character at that point. So there's no reason to allow the player to move in that direction. This is flipped variable. Now remember, is flipped is just a Boolean. If I could find it, give me 1 second. Is flipped, just a Boolean. By default, the character is facing right. It is player 1. This guy is not flipped. Bool, not flipped. Okay? If we're not flipped, this is... sorry. I made that a bit confusing. This guy is not flipped. This guy is flipped. Okay? So if you're facing right, you're not flipped. If you're facing left, you are flipped. That's in terms of this game. You could set it up however you want. Just basically know either who's on the left, who's on the right, or get the locations, compare them, figure out who's left, who's on the left, who's on the right. However you want to do it. Basically, if you're not flipped, you're on the left. So if we're on the left and our value is greater than, or our value plus the current distance apart is less than the current distance apart, then we are getting closer to our enemy. Essentially, we are moving to the right, closer to them. And thus, that is the value we want to, or that is a value we want to accept. Because if we're on the left and we're moving right, well, we're getting closer to our opponent, that is good. This is the exact opposite. So if our current distance apart minus the value is less than this, and we are flipped, that's bad. Because what that's saying is if we're on the right and we're moving to the right, then we're getting farther away from them. We don't want to allow that. So what we want to do is just subtract or change this plus to the minus and make sure you're checking for if we are flipped, is true. Okay? I know it's a bit confusing. It took me a bit to wrap my head around it. And it's kind of hard to even talk about. Like, I realized I probably didn't do the best job explaining that. But, you know, it can be tough sometimes, okay? To try and get out what I'm thinking about. So anyway, guys, I'm going to simplify it, and then we'll move on to the next part. But this is basically the only part of code we're adding, so don't worry. It's a lot of explanation for a little bit of code. So, if our current distance away from the enemy is greater than or equal to our max distance, we want to check if we're left, okay, if we're the one on the left and we're moving closer to the character, or if we're the one on the right and we're moving closer to the character. If we are, then we want to actually add that movement input. The else here is just non-existent. If we're on the left and moving farther away, or on the right and moving farther away, we don't want to allow that. We don't want the characters to move farther away from them at this point. They can only move closer to each other. This will still allow you to do all your attacks, to jump, all that stuff. But we can't move any farther in those directions until the enemy comes closer to us. That's all we want to do. The else of this total if statement, so if current distance apart is greater than equal max distance apart, the else is, if it's not greater than the max distance apart, then just do it as regular. Just add the movement input. We are close enough to move freely at this point. Okay, so again, that was a lot. Apologize. I think I said about as clear as I could. This is actually the second time I'm recording this because I didn't like the way I described it the first time. That was significantly better. No problem. If you have any issues with it, let me know. I'll be happy to help you out. But now that we're done that part, we essentially done all the code we need to do for this, and also we've essentially put in all the logic we actually need to do for this. The blueprint part of it is going to be spawning the edges, the stage boundaries. So make sure you build, and I should do this too because I changed my category. Make sure you build. It'll finish pretty quickly. And then Once you see one succeeded, hit compile. And there'll be a little compiling C++ code down in the bottom right, which you can't see because it's just out of the recording window. But as soon as you get complete, you're good. And then go to, okay, now we have to make the camera edge, actually, which is not anything in the event graph. So don't worry, we just have to make something to spawn that has collision. So put it wherever you want. I put it in blueprint. I think I put it in functional. Yep. Just add a new blueprint class. Literally an actor. Name it whatever you want. I called mine camera edge. Probably should call it stage boundary or something. But that's what camera edge is. It's essentially your edge of your map where you don't want the player to ever be able to pass. You don't need anything in your event graph. Go to your viewport. Add component. I added a static mesh. And I called it the camera edge visualizer. If you scroll down in the details panel on the right here, you can pick whatever static mesh you want. I chose the cube. Scroll down to collision. Make sure you have block all dynamic, so nothing can get past it. I turned cast shadow off because it was bothering me when it was casting the shadow. I made it much larger. I think the scale I made it to was... I kept it 1. I just made it actually really big in here. So just make some sort of plane or cube. Put it in there. And then make it invisible if you don't want it to be seen in game. I'd recommend while you're doing this, while you're following the tutorial and while you're actually implementing this, to keep it visible. Because it is extremely helpful to actually be able to see it while you're working with it, of course. Okay, default camera. We are going to go to the event graph first. So, there's a lot here, but luckily, if you watched the first episode, we've already done all of it except for this very last bit here. Everything past set player 2 ref is what we need. We've also already done everything at the bottom here, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so on begin play, after you've actually set your player references for us to use so that we can have the camera follow the players around, we want to spawn 2 camera edges, 2 stage boundaries. So the way we do this is we go from get actor transform, we spawn an actor camera edge. So these nodes are literally get actor transform, and this is getting the actor transform of the camera. We go to spawn actor camera edge. This is spawn actor from class, right here. And then you drop down your camera edge, the thing we just made, right here. Okay. Give your actor the transform of the camera. Just because they require a transform, we can position them later, so don't worry. Okay, now we're going to need 2 variables here, and they're object references. So they're going to be references to our camera edges, to our stage boundaries. So make a new variable, go through your types, find your new blueprint actor that we just made, camera edge. Click an object reference, there you go. Make one for your left and right camera, and after we spawn these actors, we will actually use them. So, spawn actor, camera edge. This is going to be our left camera edge. Then we do the exact same thing, actor transform, spawn actor, camera edge, right camera edge. Now what we want to do is actually set them in the right spot. So you could do this before, but I think it's easier to just spawn them first, and then we determine their location. So the very last thing we need to do is determine where these 2 actors should go. Oh, what happened here? Ugly. Okay. So, our set camera boundaries function. This is just a function. You can do this right in the event graph if you want. I made a new one. Just click plus function. Go to it. Okay, in here, there's a lot going on. But what we're doing is we're taking our player 1 reference, which we set earlier in begin play. Right here. And we're getting their location, breaking the vector, because this is how you can grab the Y individually. That's the part we care about. And you're going to want to set it to some value. This doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter the value I give you here. What's important is you want a value that makes your stage feel complete for this. So I did 500. You could easily do probably 1,000 even, up to 1,000. I don't think the stage would be too long. But this essentially is how far away from your character's starting point that you want to make it. Now, you don't have to do this, by the way. Okay, you can put it wherever. You can actually go into your scene, say, hey, I want to be right here at this point. Okay, you could find out what this exact pixel is, or this exact location is, copy it, and just paste it in over there. Or you can drag your camera edges into the scene, move them around, click on them, and grab their location from here. I'm just showing you how I did it so that it was consistent. So I took player 1's location, subtracted 500. I'm doing something called left max here. I know it's kind of weird to have this in here. I'm not going to really go over this because we don't use it in this episode, but this is going to be used for if we want to be able to move the walls in the future. So you might want to set this up now. Just make sure if you are setting left and right max up now, they have to be even. The left one has to be a lower value than this, than the value we're setting for our stage boundary, and the right max will have to be a greater value. And that'll make sense later in a few episodes down the line, so don't worry about it. It's not even going to really be used for the camera. It's going to be used for the stage boundary specifically, so it's fine. But I figured I'd leave it in there in case you wanted to set it up. Okay, so what we're doing is essentially taking the player 1's location, taking the X and Z, that way it's on the same plane as them, but then just subtracting 500. That way it's behind the player. So the left camera edge, if we set his actor location right here, I'm going to bring this up, then he is to the left of player 1. Then we do the exact same thing, except player 2 reference, get his location, break his vector, make sure he's on the same X and Z, and add 500 to him. So now they are consistent. The left camera boundary, or the left stage boundary, will be 500 units, pixels essentially, to the left of player 1, and the right boundary will be 500 to the right of player 2. Make a new vector. Set camera actor location, or set actor location, your right camera edge, at the new location. Okay, so what that does is that moves your camera boundaries into place. Whoops. I'm going to get these fake errors. If you ever see these, just compile and save the blueprints it tells you. This usually happens when you have the editor open and you try and build stuff. And just follow this. I'll leave that in so you guys can see in case you ever get them. Save. There you go. So you can see I have my camera boundaries. Cool. So there you go, guys. Now your character should never be able to actually go off the screen. And they should never be able to get too far apart. Oh, great. Another fake error. I knew it was coming. Let's try it again. So, they should never be able to go off the screen, and they shouldn't be able to get too far away from each other. That way they can always be in the camera's view. And that concludes the second part of the camera tutorial. Now, I will say something. So, before you go, I had to turn my stage around, and I'm not sure if this is something I did or if this is the default, but for some stupid reason, using the template, the side-scroller template, the map is switched around. And the Y was in the wrong direction, and I have not known that to this point in the tutorial. So, what that means is this whole time, I was doing things technically incorrectly. I was doing everything the wrong way. So what I mean by that, the left side was positive, and the right side was negative. So, if you're like me and you're wondering, why the heck is this not working? Why are my left and right stage boundaries reversed? Your map might be reversed. Because apparently, Epic hates us. To fix that, you can literally select everything in your world outliner here. Click the little rotate symbol, and then rotate it 180. Now, I've already done it, so I'm not going to do that, but it gives you the degrees in the middle, and you can just rotate it 180. With that, you may need to do this. I had to change my offsets since I changed my characters and changed where the player spawns were at. This means that my offsets for my hitboxes were now off. So just make them the opposite of what they were. They were 100, so I made them negative 100. That made them appear on the right side again. And also, your logic for flipping the characters might have to change as well. So if you scroll down here to tick, where you flip the characters to always face each other, you might want to change this sign now. Mine was less than or equal to. Now I made it, or mine was greater than equal to. Now I made it less than equal to. So yeah, that was a fun thing that we had to do. Because, you know, God knows why. But anyway, I wanted to point that out for you guys just in case you ran into that issue. So if you see your characters facing the wrong way or anything after that, just play around with anything that has different rotation values, like your player spawns might. Mine don't, but yours might. And you should be able to get everything working back up and running again. Oh, one more thing before we end on that note. Your movement inputs, depending on how your stage was set up, this could be negative 1.0 or positive 1.0. You might have to change this if your controls are reversed. So if you're pressing left and moving to the right, now that we've rotated it, make sure you remove the sign here. Or add this, or not add the sign, but, well, yeah, sorry. Make sure you just basically do the opposite. This is either going to be a 1 or negative 1. Make sure you just change it if your controls are reversed. Alright, guys, so that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it helped you. Sorry that it was a bit confusing. Well, it was more confusing than I would have liked. But, you know, sometimes it's like that, and I can't really think of a better way to explain it, so hopefully I did a well enough job. And there we go, guys. So, if it did help you, and you want to support the channel, please subscribe. It's the most important thing you can do, honestly. It helps me out more than anything else, because it just shows me what videos you're interested in, and that I actually did a good job in this video. If you want more help other than YouTube comments, feel free to leave a comment. But you can join our Discord community, which has about 100 members. And that community will help you out. There's plenty of programmers in there, artists, all sorts of people. You can also recommend ideas in there. And we chill and, you know, watch each other's Twitch streams and have a fun time. So feel free to join if you're interested in making your own game or you have any questions about anything we covered. I'll be happy to help you out. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support us on Twitch, like I just mentioned, Shawnthebro 27 on Twitch. We do Souls Wednesday, which is like Dark Souls games, Resident Evil Friday, and usually Monday, Tuesday, or Sunday, we do a multiplayer game with friends. So if you're interested in joining us on that, you know, I'd love to have you, and it'd be great to see you. Anyway, guys, after that, I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one where we work on the walking and jumping animations for the characters. Alright, guys. Goodbye.